big weekend in sport, especially the fight world. You know, when the UFC is on, it's always a big weekend of sport. UFC 292 in Boston, Sean O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling was the headline. Pay-per-view event, pay-per-view card. Once again, sold out crowd, 18,139 people filled the TD Garden. The gate was impressive, $7.25 million. Listen to this. It is the highest gate in the arena's history that was not an NBA Finals or NHL Stanley Cup Finals matchup. Unbelievable. Look, I mean, Dana White's a Boston boy. He started in Boston. But even that, I mean, I was listening to his press conference after the fight, and he was saying how the city's filled with red and green wigs, people coloring their hair, O'Malley T-shirts. They reckon that it was that busy that they're doing an economic report now to find out the true financial impact on the city of Boston.
Well, you know, we talk about Dana White and UFC a lot on this podcast, but it's because, you know, every time, I mean, he's setting new standards. I mean, you know, he comes out, you know, highest grossing event that wasn't one of their anchor tenants playing in a championship. You know, Sean O'Malley's, I think, the second champion coming from the Contender Series.
Yes.
You know, again, something that Dana's very proud about just the opportunity that show does and how much he loves going in and watching those fights. But the Contender Championship fight was one of the best fights of the night. You know, so you know Dana White is, you know, golden. You know, he's got the golden touch right now. He's got the Midas touch. A lot of really good things going on. That fight was, you know, lived up to its billing, and Sean O'Malley lived up to his billing. I mean, dangerous fighter, dangerous striker against a great champion that was formidable, and you know, that right hand put him, changed his life. You know, for sure. And like you said, lots of colored wigs out there right now running around.
He was a huge underdog. I'll give you an interesting stat. Dana White, in his press conference again, which I love watching just as much as I love watching the fights, he asked his PR people, his media people, how many reporters are in this room? They told him 70. He goes, okay, how many of you tipped Sean O'Malley to win by knockout before the fight? How many do you think answered?
Oh, I'd say less than 5 in that room probably had him for a knockout.
1. Media guys who cover the UFC week in, week out, 1 reporter tipped O'Malley to win. 1 out of 70, right? He was a huge underdog. Everybody said Sterling will get him, take him to the ground, and it's game over.
Right.
Good night, Irene. What did O'Malley do? His takedown defense was on point. Sterling tried time after time after time, and he caught him coming in. That punch that he came in with, he lunged in. He was trying to throw a big, I think it was a right hand, which he moved back on, and he caught him straight in. He was fully committed. So that's what we see here. We have seen the emergence of a new star. Sean O'Malley is one of the icons of UFC/pop culture, or whatever you want to call it. He's very popular in UFC circles, and he's very popular in mainstream social media, digital world circles, right? Now, my question to you is he the new face of the UFC?
Yeah, he is. He's certainly their next marketable champion for sure. And Dana said as much. He goes, the kid is dynamic. He's got a great personality. They were trying to compare him to McGregor, and Dana was very quick to say, look, when Conor broke onto the scene, Conor brought Europe with him. He brought a whole new continent with him, for UFC. And O'Malley isn't bringing a continent, but what he is bringing an excitement to to a division, and certainly pardon the pun, but he's bringing color, a colorful champion to the table, much in the way that Connor was, as during his rise, you know, willing to talk, willing to chirp, engaging with media. He's not reserved. Sean O'Malley is what you and look, props to he's an Arizona boy from Glendale, so we're celebrating our home state guy too at the same time. But having a champion that's skilled and talented is one thing. Much like Ali. Ali was skilled and talented. Man, he was much more masterful as the promoter and as the character and the charismatic guy that he was. And that's one of those things that O'Malley has. Whether and to your point, if he lost that fight, he was still going to be that charismatic. He was still going to be a guy that lurked in that division, was going to sell tickets and be a great fighter for UFC. Now he's a champ. Now you got to come get him and get him on his terms. This is going to be fun, and certainly, look, Dana White. I like to watch his press conferences, and the first thing people are asking is like, so who's he fighting next? And Dana's like, man, we just got finished with this one. I hadn't even gotten into the war room yet to figure out the next fight.
Exactly.
He's great at dodging that question, but you and I both know he's already got the next fight figured out.
Guaranteed.
He's playing chess, So, but it's great to see him kind of keep the UFC media at bay. He is certainly one of the next stars of UFC. And his next several fight defenses, assuming that he wins his next one, and after that are going to be sellout. They're going to be big fights. They're going to be massive.
He said a few more things, that this was trending to be the highest grossing pay-per-view at bantamweight ever. So this guy can sell, no problems. One of the other observations that I picked up on is the UFC rarely ever show the knockout, the highlights of the fight or the full fight. They aired O'Malley's full fight. They aired the finish. They aired multiple different things that they don't usually do.
Multiple angles of that.
Exactly.
Of that finish.
Exactly. What does that tell you?
Well, that they obviously that was a big finish for that fighter, and they're like, this is a talented kid that took down the guy that everybody thought was the unbeatable. And so like as you said, they are always been very protective of the shot. How many times the ESPN's show you the grappling, and then it's a still shot of the punch getting thrown but not landed, and then but this one, I think Dana White is a very smart man, and he said, hey, I'm going to let y'all, all y'all that didn't pay for this, I'm going to let you see what you missed, because you know what you're going to do next time Sean O'Malley's fighting? You're buying the damn fight.
Absolutely.
You're buying the whole thing.
Absolutely, and it's going to trend. That's going to trend online on all digital platforms. One other thing that we also observed from that fight night is that O'Malley now is, if you listen to the Boston crowd, he's not a Boston native. The crowd were going ballistic. It was like that was his home state. They were cursing Sterling. They were going off, and they were obviously the Bostonians are known for that, But the way that happened was unbelievable. The crowd were really behind him. It was like it was his home state. And this guy is such a marketable character. I think, honestly, he brings a different age demographic to the sport. And like I said to you, he brings that pop culture, that online world, the online community, that streaming community, that community there into the UFC. So for me, those highlights, that's why they were released. We had streamers commentating the fight everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and again, the fact that he is a champion that that arose from the Contender Series. So there's a lot of people that saw Sean O'Malley from day one. His journey. They can go back. And if you didn't, you can go back and watch that Contender Series. When he fought in there. So I mean, again, again, the brilliance of UFC and Dana White is that this is a champion that's self-made. It's
For sure.
that is homegrown, if you will,
For sure.
within the UFC. From a Contender Series all the way to a championship belt. He's got a long history ahead of him with UFC as a champion and as a fighter and as someone that they're going to hold up on a pedestal of showing them this is how we build our brand, organically internally, as much as we do getting fighters from other parts of the world or maybe from other fighting leagues where they maybe cut their teeth and all of a sudden they became much a little bit, they wanted to step up to the big leagues. And Dana White is always happy to unify in that way as well. So
and as we were saying off air about a different fighter, he's putting the machine behind him now. He's putting the machine behind him.
That's right. That's right. And Dana White is the ultimate machine. Any fighter that's in UFC knows that, and Dana said this in one of his press conferences too, is that anybody that gets a title shot has earned that title shot.
100%.
I mean, he's not manufacturing a guy to fight three or four or five tomato cans championship. Those guys are all fighting like real deal fights. I mean, and you got the BMF belt out there too. So you got guys that could be champions that are fighting for a belt that just made it up, and people are watching, and it's a feature fight. I mean, with the
Contender Series,
I mean,
alone is now attracting tens of millions of views around the world. So fighters are coming in there with their profiles being built before they go into the actual UFC.
Yeah.
Automatically, their profiles are changing and increasing and becoming more popular just by fighting on the Contender Series. So the infrastructure they have in place is amazing. Nobody comes close. I know people say one championship in PFL, whatever. They've still got a long way to go. Yeah. All right, enough about the UFC and Dana. We love what they're doing, but we need to keep going.